Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. I am your host, Radu Palamariu, Managing Director of Elkat Global.
Great pleasure to have another great guest today, Asger Lauritsen, and he is part of the Group Executive Management. He's the Chief Procurement Officer in charge of a very wide portfolio from procurement, supply chain, manufacturing, logistics, and more at FLSmidth. FLSmidth, for those of you who may not know, is one of the leading suppliers of engineering, equipment, and services to the cement and mining industries globally. More than 13,000 employees, more than 750,000 supplier deliveries, and 250,000 customer deliveries every year. So large scale operation. Pleasure to have you, Asger. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Also a warm welcome from here, from Copenhagen, on the other side of the world. So where we
from sunny Copenhagen. So you have your 3 days of summer.
Rare days where the temperature exceeds 25 degrees. So from a blue sky.
Super. So maybe let's start a little bit with yourself, right? So we were talking offline. I find your career fascinating, Asger. I mean, it's not often that, so you've done everything from running businesses. You were for a long time with Maersk, where you were general manager. Then you were in charge of IT and technology. Then you did operations. Then you ended up as chief procurement officer in your last job. Then you were with Norden as well, chief procurement and chief technology, right? Now you're a very broad portfolio. Tell us a little bit about that and how did it help you be who you are now?
Now, when you say I started with sales and marketing. I mean, visiting customers, clients, and so I know how it feels to have things delayed or getting the wrong stuff at the wrong times. And then working in a number of different countries, work my way into operations, supply chain, procurement, sort of the engine of a good car. And then really been inspired by working with transformation, leading, managing a number of large-scale transformation programs. I mean, business IT and Maersk, the whole backbone operations, where we worked a lot on the on-time delivery, where we for 18 quarters were setting a new record as a differentiator in the industry to be the most reliable. And then similar in Norden on procurement and the technical, and then also here leading a transformation in FLSmidth through working more through a decentralized regional structure, however, more on centralization of our processes, our technology. And then I've had the pleasure of living and working both in high-income countries like US, UK, but also living in low-middle income countries like Pakistan, India, worked a lot with China and other Asian countries, seeing that in these low-middle income countries that you have huge growth rates. I mean, I remember back when I came to Pakistan, I met one of the heads for one of the mobile companies, and they just exceeded the subscription number 5 million. And then just 12 months later, they exceeded subscription number 20 million. So that in those economies, you also really see fast paced growth and also good buying. I mean, that's yes, low middle income countries, but you have everything from one end to another end. So even in some of those large countries, if 10% have an average living standard, as we know from continental Europe or UK, US, then it actually exceeds the amount of people that lives in the entire Scandinavia. So, I mean, and people sometimes forget that you have this more mixed picture, why we refer to high-income countries and low-middle income countries.
And I wanted to also go a little bit deeper. Were there certain inflection points in your career because the ability to switch like you did from business to general management, sales, marketing, supply chain, operations, IT, is not common and is not necessarily easy for most people, and that's why most people don't do it. So looking back, were there certain points in your career that say, okay, because I did this, that helped me do the next and the next and the next?
One thing, I mean, be curious, I mean, raise the finger, make yourself useful, I mean, work a lot with stakeholders, and then really, I also believe putting the customer in center. So yes, we are in operations, supply chain, and procurement. But what we do it for the customer to have a better experience. So we measure a lot on our Cypher supply in full, we measure even more on our DIFOT delivering full to our customers, because it's really about that the customer has experience. And yes, I really enjoyed my time in sales, being with the customers. It gives a lot of inspiration, day-to-day pressure on working on getting the right supplies. I mean, the procurement, the whole buying, getting things to the right spaces on time, and thereby impact on the customer experience. I mean, if you take a car, I mean, it's not just the steering wheel and the speedometer. It's really about the engine, how the engine is performing, the gears, and that's also my organization's contribution to the whole experience, that we make sure that the engine, the gear is running, so that the driver has a good experience of the car.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And that's, I mean, in our work around executive search, we find that a lot of times with operations, with supply chain, especially, mid-level as they're going up the ranks, and sometimes even senior, that's the missing piece. If you've only been in operations and you forget the customer, then you're basically, what are you working for, right? So that piece tends to be so fundamental. And across the board, typically when I speak to people like yourself that have made different switches, different careers, the customer always should be first and should come at the center. It's just that sometimes we forget. So I think that point that you made is, I cannot highlight it enough.
And every week I report back to our executive management board on our dialogue towards our customers, because it's so important. And if something is not working, then we together with our colleagues, we do whatever we can to fix, because it is important for the overall experience. Also, when you move through a pandemic. And then I would also say the career, I mean, I always recommend when I meet younger people, I mean, yes, try yourself out in the US, the UK, the European countries, but also try the more difficult parts of the world, because that gives even more experience. And you see, I mean, when you work in India and Pakistan and some of the African countries, China, I mean, you meet competition on a different level, and you meet a lot of fascinating people that are really with a commercial mindset. These days, I mean, you can see, well, one of my good favorite examples is the new Polestar. I mean, what China together with Sweden, Volvo has developed, and taking Volvo to a new level with the Polestar, the battery car. So that intersection, I mean, that crossing field between the new high growth economies and the more traditional is fascinating. And you can only, I mean, you need to be there, live and work. I mean, it's a little different being just the backpack tourist and get the full experience. I mean, get out there, try yourself out. I mean, that would be my strong recommendation.
Cannot agree more. And it's so crucial if you want to have also a global role or an international career. I mean, if you've not worked cross continents, and arguably, to your point, different economies at different stages of development, you cannot run in a global role because you wouldn't understand. So love that perspective. Going a little bit into into some of the key areas, and we actually got a question on YouTube. I can't pull it out here, but it's on sustainability, right? And I know that, of course, you deal a lot with cement, which sometimes, is seen as a not very sustainable mining, right? As a whole, pretty intensive industries for the environment. Tell us a little bit how you at FLSmidth tackle this, and how do you focus on actually making your services and your products sustainable?
I mean, we invest a lot each and every year in our research and development to develop more sustainable products, both for the mining and cement. And you can say, I mean, mining industry is moving into a growth cycle because we all want to have hybrid or electrical cars, battery cars. We all want to have energy from the grid, from windmills, solar panels. So there's a huge demand on battery materials and copper, and that, of course, comes from mines. So therefore, I mean, also our contribution is to make sure that those mines are operating as sustainable as possible. And most mines are, you can say, not at the born tourist destinations in the world. So I mean, difficult, accessible places. And we are developing solutions that where you don't need water, as an example, which is an issue for some of the mines, and similar also reducing the emission on the cement. So we actually leaned out and said that we want to have emission zero by 2030. And we have signed to the science-based targets, like I believe it's 1,400 other companies in the world. So really taking the lead in our industry to differentiate from competition. Also, that we can then also attract investors that look for green technology. So there are a lot of pension funds that are quite demanding, and then they can actually also invest in our company because we're actually taking the cement plants and the mines to the next level. There, yes, we are a premium supplier on that, but we also see that there is increased demand for those technologies. And then you can say that's the upstream part. Then for the supply chain procurement, the downstream, that we then select suppliers that can follow us on that journey. And there are actually two dimensions in that journey. There is when we started our transformation in FLSmidth on the procurement supply chain, we were entertaining more than 15,000 suppliers. Now we're down on less than 7,500, but actually 90% of our spend is with less than 1,500. So really a more consolidation, and it's easier to work with fewer suppliers than many, because then you can really partner up. So that's the one dimension. I have this joke with our category heads. They're allowed to work with as many suppliers as they can remember the zip codes and the contact persons. And then
zip codes is a tough one, Asger, but
then on the back side of my door, I have a nice list of our partner suppliers. So those, of course, locked out of also ours, but it's just to make it very practical, tangible. So that's the one. I mean, really work with fewer, work together, and a lot of our good partner suppliers, they have also signed to the science-based targets. So some of the most tough measurements these days. Then the second dimension is this whole regionalization that we see more nearshoring. I mean, that things sort of localize more, and there our regions are really, really important. That these 1,500 partner suppliers, they are sort of equally spread around in the world, so we can source fabrication, mechanical stuff from Turkey, we can source it from Romania, we can source it from China, Vietnam, US, South America. So and very agile shift between the different suppliers. So when freight suddenly go through the sky, or there's blank sailings or congestion in ports, I mean, then we can actually shift within our supply chain. So we're moving away from this single string supply chain into a more flexible, agile. And we saw those mega trends, I mean, a few years ago in supplying to our mine sites in particular and to the cement plants, but we've seen that pandemic has accelerated that. I mean, each and every day when you open the newspaper, you see governments that want to have their own vaccine production. So, I mean, this whole mindset, a little bit unfortunate that I mean, you see this more protectionism is not healthy for world trade, but still, I mean, then the nearshoring, I mean, so gluing things together and being able to transport between the various economies is sort of the next spike as we see it.
Well, I mean, that, and I'll ask you more about that, because that is linked with freight rates also going skyrocket, which is accelerating nearshoring. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit further into some of the lessons, and also how, I guess, you managed to reduce drastically, right? So from 15,000 to 7,000 plus suppliers, out of which realistically only 1,500 are the ones that are getting 90% of your business, right? So when you do that, firstly, how do you do that? When you mentioned the key, right? Remember the names, the zip codes, that's one. But what are some of the criteria on how do you select which one is better than the other one? And how do you also do the change management around getting the organization on board?
Yeah, I mean, you see that again, it sounds easier than it's done. I mean, again, it's multidimensional. So one is that the more you can standardize and modularize your products, your service offerings, the better, because that also makes it easier for the supplier to contribute. And then really involve the suppliers that sort of put up the fingers, are curious, involve them in that standardization, modularization with good ideas. So it becomes a dual process. And then the other dimension is the whole digitalization. That yes, we regionalize, decentralize, but on the processes, we tend to be more rigid. You can compare a little bit to a McDonald's restaurant. I mean, I knew a few guys that are running franchisees on McDonald's, and they really feel that they are fully empowered on supporting the local market, but all the processes behind, the supplies behind are quite centralized. So we have dashboards available for our colleagues so that they can track and trace and look into the supplies on a daily basis, see open POs, late POs, I mean, and then they can adjust to that agile framework. We use more virtual inspections so that instead of having people just traveling out, then really being able to do more remotely, have a control tower of expertise where people then can guide the local heroes in doing inspection and surveillance of the work, progress reporting, etc., all these kind of things that is needed, in particular towards the mines.
And if I were to ask you, Asger, what was one of the challenges, right? So you've come in, you've said, okay, let's implement this. Usually we don't like change, right? normal human behavior, right? So tell us also the flip side, right? What was some of the challenge, the biggest hurdle to overcome in this process?
And you could say one of the challenges is actually the P landscape, the IT landscape. And we are a company, we've been here for 140 years, and we also plan to be here the next 140 years, but it's been a mix of organic growth and acquisitions. And then you take over all kinds of IT systems, and maybe you're not disciplined enough in making the needed changes and having one big IT system. But we then did because that was really, really a hurdle stone for us, all these different IT systems. But then robots, artificial intelligence, I mean, PCs acting as robots, because they don't care whether it takes half an hour or 45 minutes to work through 3 or 4 different IT systems. They actually learn. So initially, I mean, I was down there looking at the robots. I mean, you see pictures on the screen, I mean, floating like crazy. And initially it took maybe, 28, 29 minutes, 8 minutes, and now they're down to 20, 30 seconds. And so you find another solution to that complexity. That may not be the super good news for the oracles and SAPs of the world, that these robots are able to move around in those systems. Then you become much more dependent on the data quality. So, and the competences of your colleagues, in particular in front lines. So there we were running initially educational. I mean, we linked up with some of the really strong education institutions on the procurement supply chain, and they tailor-made from standardized modules, e-learning for our people, where they could get certificates they could also use, I mean, in case they want to do something else in life. But I mean, that they've got certified in procurement, purchasing, supply chain, quality, health and safety, inspection, all these kind of things for different modules that they could select. So it's really competence building, because then through that competence building, you also build in the change management.
No, absolutely. So when you say robots, just for everybody, I guess you're meaning the RPA and the robotic process automation and the soft robots, not the hard robots here for everybody.
We have, I mean, our assembly centers, we have, I mean, all kinds of
that's the different,
the traditional thing. I mean, IT robots, ERP robots, and if we look back 2 years ago, less than 5% of our POs were generated by robots. Now we're approaching 50%, really accelerating, and it's self-propelling, self-accelerating.
No, and to your point, I mean, these things, and I think it's interesting, and we're getting quite some questions as well. Yeah, you don't necessarily need the big brands. You mentioned 2 of them. I mean, there's some others, but I mean, they can work across systems, and then you don't necessarily need another ERP major change system at the core of the organization that can take even years to implement, right?
And if you run out of capacity, you can always buy a new one, and that's $1,000 at most. I mean, then you just add it to the series of the existing robots. So it's and you get more predictable in your because the robots they don't make errors. So if you find errors, then it's not due to the robot. Then it's something in your process that you then need to go back and revisit your process, data quality. So it's really, I mean, I have my manifest here behind me. I mean, it's really about having the people and then the processes. And once you have data colleagues and the right processes, then you can always add technology. I think buy a computer and then certainly what I'm supposed to use this for, and by the way, who's going to operate it? I mean, that would never work. So it's always for us, I mean, people, process, and then technology.
People, process, technology. Love it. And on the people side, right? So I'll stay a little bit, I'll probe even deeper. So you mentioned that a big challenge was technology, right? So you implemented robots, you changed a little bit the processes, the data quality. How about the people mindset, right? Because if they were used to dealing with 15,000 suppliers, not necessarily cool, but they were used to that, right? So that was the good old way of doing things around here, right? In that change management, in changing their mindset and getting them on board, what were some of the elements that, were maybe challenging, and how did you overcome it?
That is a difficult process. I mean, we went from, as an example, from 60 different carriers and forwarders in our hub and spoke distribution system to 3. And if you've been used to dealing with one forwarder for many years, I mean, and then suddenly you get this more globalized process, then you need to have a lot of good explanations. But as I say, I mean, when we do the tendering and negotiations, I mean, all are up. I mean, it could be that there is a local one that could take on a more globalized role. They really want and take part. I mean, that could also be an opportunity for that local organization. So it's not that everything has to come out of one region. So we try to sort of split. But yes, I mean, for those who have been used to sitting with the same drawings, with the same specs, the same suppliers, and they don't want to change, then it's a challenge.
Absolutely. Let's go back to also the topic of nearshoring, and that's a big one, right? It's you spoke about focusing on that. Also, it's accelerated, like we discussed, also because the freight rates right now are. And you did mention that you have a good distribution, but almost wherever you are now, I mean, okay, you mentioned some points in Europe that maybe is not linked, but the rest are, there seems to be fires everywhere, and it's just new fires coming up, whether it's a port in China or one in Canada or God knows what, right? So tell us a little bit more about this, and how do you see it playing out in the next 3 to 5 years?
It takes, if you have a price tag of $4,000 to $5,000 from China to US, and you can take things in from Mexico for around $1,500, then it of course makes nearshoring in Mexico more attractive if you have commodities of low value in your container. That's what we see also. It also opens up for other means of transportation. I mean, we use the railroad from China into Europe a lot. It's very efficient. It doesn't take too long time, and we can load just 20 minutes from our lead factory in Qingdao. So it's that also push, you can say, on the nearshoring. And then to add on that, I mean, if you take the big CNC machines you use for machining things, I mean, then the labor content get less and less because they are automated, robot arms, whatever. You can program them straight from your computer in the design office. And you see salary inflation, wage inflation, both in India and in China. So the less labor content you have, and then you combine it with that salary wage inflation, and then the obstacles with high freight rates and congestion, and I would say the rates are what rates are, but the unpredictability of congestion is actually worse, because then you cannot deliver on the time you promised, and that gives more constraint on organization than maybe the actual price tag, and that again push to the nearshoring. So we see more and more companies moving things back into Europe, into US. Does it hit China? Not so much actually, because we also during the pandemic seen huge growth in China because the domestic consumption is coming up. So some of the products we're selling in China, I mean, they're booming there. I mean, the cooler size example for the cement. So it's a mixed picture, but we definitely, I mean, I did this Google search on nearshoring. When we started our transformation a little more than 3 years ago, I mean, not many people talked about it. Now, during the pandemic, it became more and more obvious. And now, I mean, each and every week, almost every second day in the media, Financial Times, I mean, there's an article about companies moving production to where it's actually being consumed. The automotive, I think, the only car brand that is only having one string of manufacturing is Porsche, but that's part of their brand. But the rest, I mean, are moving around and having assembly sites in various places.
Yeah, but I mean, was it about 12 months ago? There was also all sorts of predictions that this is going to go super fast, and China is losing out, and I don't know what. But there's also reality. These things take time, and whilst it might be accelerating, it's also not great for you to change your factory in the middle of a pandemic. And it's not also like you can just pick and pack, and then okay, you put it elsewhere. And I don't know for you guys, but with mines, you don't even get to choose where is the mine. It's not like, okay, I put my diamond mine somewhere else because I like it better.
And the same with cement plants, they're also where they are. I mean, due to the infrastructure and the minerals in that location. So that's how it is. And there you see, I mean, also during the pandemic, I think people in those regions, countries, they're also more aware of that you have different kind of lockdowns. You had the wave 1, 2, and 3, but at different timings. So then you have a lockdown in Peru, then you need to figure out how to supply to Peru during that lockdown. And then you have it in South Africa, and then in India, that hits both your business and supplies. But then behind the scene, underground, some of these economies are actually also seeing very good growth rates. I saw the other day in Financial Times that India in first quarter, 21 to 20, their manufacturing grew with 9% and consumption grew with 14%. So a lot of those relief packages are definitely in those countries also contributing positively to that. And then there is, when we look into the regions, to the local countries, there is an increased demand from the local societies to buy more locally. I mean, mostly expressed by Trump during his presidency in the U.S. And so, but that's not only there. So it's all over. So it's sort of a mix, and then you have to glue it together. So for us, the most perfect combination of having very empowered, regionalized teams taking care of the day-to-day in the local economies, but then have the centralized overview so that you have and the agility and flexibility to adapt to the changing environments.
I don't know if anybody knows exactly, but anyways, I'm going to throw it at you, Asger. Peter is asking me, okay, when will container rates return to normal? So there you go. I mean, it's not only him, it's a lot of people wondering.
It's annoying with port congestions and these high rates, but I think things will normalize. I mean, spend some time in shipping, and supply and demand tend to equalize, so things will normalize.
I want to shift a little bit also towards the later part of our conversation on the people side. But before I go there, I also have a curiosity, because you've done, I don't know, 10, 15 years now in supply chain related, operations related, and have a personal question. What's the most rewarding part, right? You spoke about the engine of the organization, but tell us more, what's the most rewarding part of your job?
Yeah, I mean, I can push an anecdote and then sort of more generalistic. I mean, in general, when things, I mean, really, I mean, no noise is good noise. When you have happy customers, people are focused in the day-to-day business to deliver to the promise, because on-time delivery, it's not just, I mean, it's also a handshake, a promise that you get what I promised to. I mean, you also expect that I will dial in here at noon today. I mean, that's part of the experience, and that pleases me. I mean, when things are running like a well-oiled engine, I mean, and you can hear click, 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 click. I mean, that's good. But then on a more personal level, I mean, human to human. I mean, when we did back in when I was working with the large container line and the relief effort, we were at the end the only foreign carrier actually still sailing to Japan during the Fukushima crisis, the nuclear disaster. And after that the local mayor of the port came to our team in Shanghai to thank in person the people that had worked in China. I mean, the night light. I mean, day in and day out to support people in Japan. I mean, those impressions mean a lot. I mean, that's sort of the operation with a human element.
Like it a lot. Final question from me for the young audience, maybe not only, but looking back on your career, what would be one piece of advice that helped you the most? What would be one piece of wisdom that you would share?
As said, I mean, be curious, look for the things that are not working, but always come forward with a solution and make yourself useful. I mean, so not everything can be written down in job descriptions and role profiles. I mean, it's really about making yourself useful, and then don't be afraid for the unknown. I mean, I had my thoughts when I got stationed in Pakistan, as an example, but it was a great experience. Met a lot of very interesting people, really got a feel for how a low middle income country also can really have really high paced growth rates. And then again, I mean, when we have a pandemic, a crisis, I mean, we also had the big earthquake in Pakistan, where at that time the company I worked for, we were the first foreign company to actually be present in the area of the earthquake and supplying containers as relief packages to the people they could use for sheltering and operations. So yes, you're running a company operation, but you're doing it with a high degree of social consciousness and mindfulness to the local societies.
Like it a lot. Well, on that note, Asger, thanks a lot for joining us. Quite a few other comments. I'll take you separately. Good luck with the work ahead. The crisis will continue to hit, so good luck with that as well. And hopefully some more sunny days as well in Denmark.
Just one final comment. Whenever you have something, I mean, which is hit hard like the pandemic, you always get out of it. There's always something on the other side. And it's how you act and how you work and how you prepare yourself for that determines how well you do on the other side. So,
very true. My grandfather used to say that after summer comes winter, but also after winter comes summer. So we always have to keep some sort of bigger picture in mind that this too will end. Super. Well, glad to have had you. Thanks a lot for the time, and catch you soon.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.